Hi, I'm Casey Frashante. I'm an astrologer, and today I wanted to give a presentation and demonstration on synastry, which is it's used in relationship astrology, and it's when you compare the planets in person A's chart to the planets in person B's chart, and you look at the aspects between each planet and can kind of get a general picture of what the relationship will be like. But what's often misunderstood about synastry is the fact that you're actually supposed to look at each native's natal chart and determine what kind of personality they are in relating with others and understanding their love style and their capacity to relate. This is often overlooked by most people claiming to be astrologers. And I wanted to demonstrate uh, my astrology against my best friend's astrology and getting into the nuances of our chart and our personalities, and then comparing my chart to my husband's chart. And even though there are going to be good and bad aspects in any kind of relationship, I want to explain why I married my husband and why where the kind of sore spots are in our relationship and where the sore spots are in mine and my best friend's relationship. Even though we are best friends, it's one of those things where nothing is perfect, and I wanted to kind of just demonstrate how this works in astrology and how you can kind of use this in your own practice, in your own study, and have some fun. So if I share my screen, um, let's start with my best friend's chart. And when you're looking at someone's capacity to relate, you're going to want to look at the seventh house, planets in the seventh house ruler, and the moon. Just because the moon is the core personality of the person and it's what we need. It's totally non-negotiable in someone's personality. And if someone can't meet another person's non-negotiable needs, the relationship will kind of fall apart, or it would be too difficult for it to be um, productive in any kind of way. So if we look at her seventh house ruler, she has Taurus on the descendant, which is ruled by this Venus in Scorpio. And Venus in Scorpio is in its fall because Venus is ruled by Taurus. It's very strong in Taurus. When you have Venus in fall, it can't operate in a Venusian kind of way. You know, Venus is um, what we spend money on, how we relate to others in, not necessarily a superficial uh, kind of fashion, but it is more about, it's not moon relating, it isn't emotional relating, it's just social relating and connecting. And so with Venus and Scorpio, this is someone that is going to have a kind of possessive and intense uh, attachment to their relational style in that, Venus and Taurus can also be possessive, but it's more materially possessive. Venus and Scorpio, with Scorpio being a water sign, is going to be emotionally very possessive. And sorry, I'm just looking at my notes. Um, it's also especially being in the 12th house. This someone that is very secretive, and when we look at my chart, it's the Venus is a very different um, someone that's very secretive and kind of, a loner in a lot of ways. Venus being that social urge, being in the 12th house in Scorpio, it's going to give her more of a withdrawn kind of sociability. And the aspects that you want to look at the aspects to the seventh house ruler as well. It's only making a square to Uranus in her third house. And so, when you have Venus in aspect to Uranus, um, this is going to be someone that is kind of under the impression that they don't need relationships. Uranus rules freedom, and she needs the freedom to, be her own person. And Venus in a woman's sign has a lot to do with her femininity. And, she's a straight woman. So, with men and stuff like that, she doesn't want to be tied down to a relationship and kind of have to deal with um, another person kind of, being in a space, especially, Venus in the 12th house is someone that kind of needs their own um, time to be a bit of a recluse and spend time with themselves. And in a relationship, you have someone kind of like invading your space all the time. And, Venus and Scorpio doesn't want to be invaded, or uh, they like to do the invading. They don't like feeling intruded upon. And so with the Venus square Uranus, this is someone that is kind of afraid to get close, and it's an interesting dichotomy as well because Venus and Scorpio is someone that wants to be consumed by someone else and consume someone else at the same time, and yet with the square to Uranus, this is something going on in her own psyche where she wants that closeness, but also doesn't want to get too close, and this is a real sore spot in her personal life because she's trying to reconcile the two. And I keep saying to her, anyone with a Venus Uranus aspect is going to be better off with a partner that they don't have to, live with full time or be around full time. This can literally just mean that, she can marry someone that is traveling a lot for work, someone like a pilot, someone doing potentially something very Uranian, like a pilot. It's just someone that isn't doesn't need to be around her all the time, and the emotional closeness can kind of come from a long distance, especially with the 12th house. The 12th house rules faraway lands. It can, and especially the square to Uranus, which rules technology, it can be, an online relationship, a long distance relationship where you talk on the phone every day, things like that. Um, so she has this issue with wanting to be close, but not wanting to be too close. And so that is kind of her general relational style. And then if we look at her moon, she has this like needy moon in Cancer, and it's in the ninth house, which is someone that is very emotionally attached to their beliefs and really kind of nurtures their beliefs at the same time. Uh, it's kind of, the ninth house is a very philosophical house. It has a lot to do with, hope, and that moon in Cancer is it can be very easily wounded. So this is not someone that is going to um, want to be around people that are constantly critiquing her beliefs. What's the word? Kind of like when someone kind of like puts down your belief systems or constantly makes you kind of justify your beliefs. Cancer is very private, it's very insular, and for people constantly, jabbing her about why do you think this, why do you believe this, and trying to make her defend herself, that's going to aggravate that moon. Um, and so the aspects that her moon is making is an opposition to Jupiter, and it's an opposition to Jupiter and a wider opposition to Mercury. And so with the moon in the ninth house, which is correlated with Jupiter, and moon being opposite Jupiter, that's really just going to compound what I just said. Very emotionally attached to her belief systems, and moon Jupiter people, they kind of have. She's gonna want to. She's the type of person that's gonna try and be everything to everyone at all the time, like all the time. And especially with the moon in Cancer, probably going to want to care for people too much all the time. Emotional clinginess is going to be a very big theme here, just because of the moon in Cancer, especially opposite Jupiter. The Jupiter is going to inflate moon in Cancer, and you know because it's a hard aspect, we don't want to talk about the nice things about uh, having moon in aspect to Jupiter, just because we're not accessing this here. It's a hard aspect, so we're going to focus on the more lower vibrational energies of Moon Jupiter. Also, with Moon Jupiter, they and especially with the Moon in the ninth house, this is going to be someone that kind of um, doesn't is unable to recognize her own prejudice and intolerance and um, Moon Jupiter people, especially in hard aspect, tend to play God a lot of the time. So she's very protective, very emotionally attached to her belief systems, and can kind of think that her belief systems are the right way, and everyone should be subscribing to what she believes people need. The moon rules the public as well. So the way she kind of views um, the world as a whole, and I don't want to say like society because that's more Uranian, but she does have Uranus conjunct the fourth house cusp, so that can get tied into the analysis as well. But I don't want to branch out too far. She's just someone that feels like, and the Cancer Capricorn axis as well. This is going to have a lot to do with government, and I see this a lot in her personality. Moon in Cancer as well is going to be very patriotic. This is going to be someone that kind of is going to listen to the government, and let's just say hypothetically she subscribes to whatever the government believes at any given time. She's going to be someone that kind of defends those beliefs, and so someone else with a different, kind of political stance and someone kind of questioning her about like, well, why do you support this party and whatnot. She's going to get very heated about that and kind of can't put herself in she definitely can't put herself in other people's shoes, and I say definitely just because moon in Cancer is very kind of self-concerned in the sense of their own emotional well-being and safety, and so why would Cancer kind of leave the shell to understand a different perspective when it's very much comfortable there. And opposite Jupiter, the tendency to kind of think they know what is best for public and um, everything like that. So it's someone that is, not comfortable putting themselves in other people's shoes and viewing things from other people's perspectives, especially concerning, um, domestic matters with the moon being in Cancer, moon ruling the ninth house of her belief system. She's not too interested in changing her belief systems just because she feels safe in what she already knows. And then, the moon opposite Jupiter as well. The moon opposite Neptune is going to give a kind of fragility to her emotional nature, especially with the moon in Cancer. It's going to be someone that is, kind of, overly sensitive. And, Jupiter is expanding on the moon Neptune opposition as well. It's going to be someone that is overly sensitive, overly fragile, um, and doesn't really understand where she stands uh, emotionally a lot of the time, kind of washed out by that, the Neptunian kind of urge to just, merge with other people. And, Moon Jupiter and Moon Neptune can have the problem of being overly generous with people. There's not a lot of discernment, especially with Moon Jupiter. It can give someone the trait of kind of giving too much of yourself to other people. And I find that with the hard aspects between Moon and Jupiter, it's giving too much of yourself to the wrong people a lot of the time. And, having Moon opposite Neptune as well, this is someone that is easily influenced. Um, so what can we kind of gather about her general kind of um, relational ability with the Mars square, the Venus square Uranus, and the opposition from Moon to Jupiter and Neptune? Um, Clearly someone more on the sensitive side and someone that's more, socially withdrawn as well. This isn't going to be someone that you will find typically um, at a nightclub surrounded by lots of people. Not someone that's going to, live in kind of a share house with nine other people and, go to, a lot of social events all the time. This is someone that has a more exclusive kind of circle and someone that spends a lot of time doing things alone. And even though we've looked at her kind of relational profile, we can also take into account other things about her personality. Um, she has this sun in Sagittarius in the first house, and I've noticed that she comes across as more open than she actually is. There is a charisma there to her. She kind of like lets people in, but very shallowly, and doesn't really let people in past, the barriers that are in place, especially with, the Venus and Scorpio. Um, and being a Scorpio rising as well, it can kind of go both ways with Scorpio risings. They can tend to be, the very kind of mournful type, the darker type. But you wouldn't look at her and think that she's kind of a Scorpio rising with that sun in the first house. She comes off as more open than she actually is. Um, and then if we look at my chart and see how my personality and my relational ability compares to hers, um, I'm also my descendant is also ruled by Venus. I have Venus in Gemini in my second house, and that is essentially uh, this has more to do with me being, um, more flexible, more playful, more curious in my approach to relationships, and that I also am grounded by my relationships. I have Venus in the second house, which has to do with stability and what grounds us and what is kind of around us a lot of the time. Um, Venus in the second house, especially, in Gemini, I have more of there's a more of a stability and an openness to relating with others. If you remember, my friend has um, Venus in the 12th house, which is it's kind of locked away. It's in her blind spot as well. She's not super aware of it. And it also doesn't make any positive aspects in her chart. So there's no outlet for that Venus in the 12th house and in its fall in Scorpio as well. So it's more difficult for her to access her Venusian kind of energy. And with it ruling the seventh house, these can be people that she brings into her life as well, people that are kind of hard to access in some kind of way. Um, and with Venus and Gemini in my second house, I'm more open to people because I understand the importance of having relationships in my life. Um, and um, so if we look at my aspects between Venus and other planets in my chart, I have Venus opposite Pluto, which gives me a kind of Plutonian edge. to my Venus. If you remember, my friend has Venus in Scorpio. Scorpio is ruled by Pluto. Um, and so when someone has Venus opposite Pluto in any sign, they're going to have the tendency to attract kind of Plutonians into their life and um, obsessive kind of people and relationships. And with Venus ruling my relationship sector, this is kind of just compounded for me. And then, also Venus Pluto aspects are also very much concerned with, um, kind of, it's a very demanding kind of aspect. And it's something that requires a lot of, um, fusion and symbiosis. It's like I want the partner to be a part of me and have me be part of them. There's a lot of social closeness that I require and kind of social intensity. If you remember, she has, Venus in Scorpio, which there's um, that kind of similarity there, but it's not the same as having Venus in aspect to Pluto. She has the square between Venus and Uranus, which has to do with, emotional, social distance, excuse me, and whereas mine has to do with social intensity and there's a real like exclusivity with this kind of aspect. It's you're not letting anyone into your circle in a certain way, and not in a Uranian way where you're shutting people out. It's in more of a way where I can't trust people as easily when I relate to them because I especially Venus and Gemini it can see like two sides to every issue and when Pluto is aspecting a Gemini planet, it can make that planet really paranoid in a certain way. Um, just because Gemini thinks of so many different possibilities, and I'm more suspicious of people, even though my best friend has a very kind of suspicious Venus placement. It's overridden by the Moon Jupiter and wanting to be everything to everyone. Whereas when we get to my Moon, I think my Venus kind of makes more sense in the manner that I'm uh maybe a bit harder to get close to than she is, at least generally kind of speaking. I would consider myself, and I'm not saying this to put her down or anything. I think I am, in the long run, easier to relate to, easier to be around. Where she's probably comes off as a bit easier to hang out with and be with in general. Comes off as that at first, and then the issues kind of you know, manifest later. Also, I have Venus trining Neptune. So when I was talking about her having Venus in the 12th house, you're going to want to talk about the shadow aspects of Neptune because Neptune rules the 12th house. But again, it's not the same as having Venus in aspect to Neptune. Um, Venus in the 12th house is going to be her kind of, blind spot. It's something she's not super aware of. And having my Venus trining Neptune, I'm going to, um, kind of especially with Venus opposite Pluto as well, the barriers between me and the partner or me and the friend kind of dissipate, and it's not so clear as to especially being in the second house of what is mine. It becomes less clear of what belongs to me and what belongs to them, and it all kind of just becomes one. And Venus Pluto is going to want that kind of fusion with the partner in my relationship. My relationship axis has to do with sorry, my relationship planets are in the financial axis and possession axis. So this has a lot to do with what I own and what I have is also the partner's. What they own and what they have is also mine, and not necessarily that I'm trying to get anything out of that. It's just that's how I kind of operate in my relationships. There's no point, in my opinion, from my perspective, to have all of these kind of barriers in place as to what belongs to who. It's all kind of um, shared between us. And so, with the Venus Pluto, Venus Neptune in my chart, there's kind of like an extreme um, spiritual, social, intellectual symbiosis kind of need for me in my relational style. I need someone that's receptive to that. If someone isn't receptive to that, there's going to be issues in the relationship because I'm not having my social needs met. And, relationship, romantic or social. Um, Friendship, business partners, things like that. Anyone that's kind of in your seventh house, someone that you have a one-to-one relationship with. Um, there's also a tendency with Neptune, Venus aspects, and especially with Pluto as well, to kind of confuse um, need with love and sex with love as well. I'm personally not the type of person that can conceptualize ever being physically intimate with someone that I didn't um, love at all. The thought kind of disgusts me. I can't uh, put myself in such a vulnerable kind of position, and neither can my best friend. Although, Venus in hard aspect to Uranus isn't going to be someone that is um, sexually promiscuous necessarily. It's if anything, it's going to be someone that is more on the celibate side because they are so, cut off from the romantic urge that there is no romance at all. It's even, even basic touching. Um, Venus in soft aspect to Uranus can kind of give someone more of an openness to sexuality and sexual expression, but in the hard aspects, it can point to someone that is so um, romantically closed off that there is no sexual relating happening at all. And if we look at my moon, I have my moon in Leo in the fourth house, and so this just essentially means I want to kind of be appreciated for who I am at my core. Um, in doesn't have to be, in a showy manner. I don't need someone to kind of, put me on display all the time, but just be appreciated for who I am at my core. The fourth house has to do a lot with who we are in private and um, what goes on behind closed doors. And I just need to feel, appreciated for me. Leo is a sign of authenticity. My emotions are very kind of authentic. I don't try to, bullshit anyone, and I need to be appreciated for that. So if I was to be in some kind of partnership with someone that didn't particularly care about my feelings or needed me to kind of behave a particular way in public, this is something that is not um, going to fulfill my non-negotiable needs, just because that is kind of the opposite. That would kind of destroy me and my Leo moon. I just need someone that's going to appreciate me for exactly who I am. And I have my moon squaring Saturn, and so this is where a huge problem with me and my best friend's relationship. It's a real sore spot between us. Sorry, it's so her as a moon Jupiter person. She's kind of she has exaggerated kind of behavior. Constantly makes promises she can't keep, tries to be everything to everyone all the time. And with that is kind of she's nothing to no one because you can't spread yourself so thin like that and actually have, you know, have your needs met and meet other people's needs at the same time. Um, there's that sense of her with uh, you know, Jupiter is I relate to book smarts, and Saturn is related to street smarts, and especially, she has her moon opposite Neptune, as do I. My moon is actually engaged in a T square between Saturn and the moon. I mean, my moon is engaged in a T square to your sorry, Neptune and Saturn. So I can be um emotionally oversensitive as well, emotionally fragile, definitely. And but with the square to Saturn, that really kind of it can kind of ground my emotions in a way where I don't get as swept away as she does. We're kind of emotionally opposites, you know. Uh, we have that same kind of the sensitivity and um, the lack of kind of emotional um, grounding. We're very kind of like easily swayed in a certain way. Her more so because of that Jupiter like expanding her emotional nature. Um, and with Saturn closing mine off, I'm more discerning with what I allow to affect me. I'm more discerning with who I allow to affect me and who I even allow into my heart space. Moon in Leo is much about the heart space, especially in the fourth house. Being very private. Um, I'm very concerned with my physical home as well. I like being at home. I don't like leaving the house. She's someone, especially with Uranus conjunct the fourth house cusp. Um, she feels more at home out in the world. As Moon in the ninth house, especially, related to long distance travel, she feels more like herself away from home. Whereas I, that the thought of that even stresses me out. I know she's mentioned that she's going on some kind of like hiking trip or like a hiking expedition or something. And I just say, bitch, like, good luck with that. That sounds like there was no one could pay me enough money to to do something like that, like spending a week doing outdoor activities and sleeping in a tent and going hiking. That sounds awful to me. And I'm sure she thinks that me, staying home all the time and like reading books and everything like that, that sounds kind of like very restrictive and like hell to her, but I feel very safe. Um, so we have that similarity between Moon and Neptune of being very, you know, overly sensitive and touchy and fragile. Then her Moon Jupiter makes her less reliable. And I think this goes back to me saying like I think I'm easier to get along with in the long haul, just because there's more reason in my chart, and I'm more judicious uh, regarding everything, whereas she thinks with the opposition to Moon and Jupiter, she thinks she's being, very magnanimous and very fair a lot of the time and everything like that. But the reality is she can't really see the forest through the trees. Um, there's not much of a reality factor regarding her emotional nature. She hasn't really been, um, you know, uh, she hasn't really experienced the school of hard knocks in a particular way. So there's much more of a naivety there. I can be naive as well, but my Saturn, especially in the first house, really keeps that in check. I don't let myself kind of get swept away emotionally, at least, by feeling sorry for people and whatnot. So there are similarities between us, but there's also huge differences regarding the Venus Uranus kind of um, love nature of her and the Venus Neptune kind of love nature of me. And then if we look at um, just our general kind of synastry, so this is what I think most people are going to be familiar with. I think it's this chart. Yeah. When you look at synastry, it's essentially just someone's planets aspecting another person's planets. And right off the bat, we can see or comparing one person's chart to another person's chart. So I'm in Aries rising, I'm ruled by Mars. I have Mars in Gemini in my second house. And Mars actually makes a sextile to um my ascendant as well, which can help me relationally, just because I'm willing to kind of meet people halfway and willing to kind of put effort into my relationships as well. And I'm only talking about relationships because we're talking about the relationship axis and Mars being my chart ruler, having an outlet to my relationship axis. So I put effort into my relationships essentially. Um, so my chart ruler is in Gemini and she is a Scorpio ascendant. I know the Bible can kind of be a bit difficult to kind of get used to like this, but so Scorpio rising, she's also ruled by Mars, and she has Mars in um, Virgo. And what's interesting is that both these signs are ruled by Mercury. So, our kind of approach to relationships and our approach to life in general is, that there's this kind of activity there, but it's more mental. We take a more mental approach. Um, you know, Virgo was an earth sign ruled by Mercury. It's more critical. It's more, again, it being her chart ruler, she thinks she's more realistic than she actually is. And I can assume she's very realistic when it comes to like her day-to-day activities, her day-to-day life, more realistic, but it's just the emotional and social um aspect of her personality that can kind of that's where everything starts to come a bit loose for her. Um, whereas, I approach things more from a social standpoint, being, Gemini being an air sign, it's associated with um sociability and civility and um literally talking. Uh so I think it's just interesting that we're both ruled by Mars and we both have Mars in mercurial ruled signs. Um, and I think that comes out in our dynamic as well because we talk a lot of shit with each other. Not necessarily like gossiping or anything like that, but just kind of like seeing something on TikTok and like kind of being like super like critical about it. Meanwhile, we're like very aware how hypocritical we are, so, like saying certain things. Um, so regarding the planets aspecting the other person's planets, uh, her sun trines my moon, which is really nice. Moon sun aspects are really important in synastry because it's essentially the extroverted um the extroverted nature having contact with the introverted nature, and a trine is like um it's so easy. There's a constant kind of flow happening. And so, my kind of melodramatic emotional state is resonates with how she actually is in the world. So when we hang out together, because we're talking about the sun, this is the external personality. We have a lot of fun together. Fire signs are associated with play, and especially fire moons, they need some kind of play in relationships. Like that's how they kind of get their emotional connection. And so when we hang out together, we have a lot of fun together because my she kind of lives out my uh Leo kind of nature, because my Leo nature is so introverted, and especially with the square to Saturn, it can be hard for me to express that. But with her, she kind of unlocks that for me. So that's really good. But yeah, any kind of sun moon contact is going to be a very enduring uh, bond, and you'll notice this in synastry all the time. The conjunction by far is the most potent and the most palpable. We also actually have that. I'm pretty generous with my orbs if it's a conjunction, just because they're speaking the same language. Um, her moon is very, very widely conjunct my sun, but at the end of the day, her emotional nature is lived out through me. There is, like I mentioned, there is this huge part of her personality that wants to care for people, that wants to be cared for as well. Um, Me being a Cancer sun, I think I do meet those needs for her, and that I care for her, and she kind of witnesses me operating in a nurturing kind of manner, and I'm not shaming her for her emotional neediness. If anything, I kind of enable it a little bit. Um, so we have a moon, um, sun double whammy. Uh, Even though it's a wide conjunction, I do kind of, even if my sun was at 0 degrees of Cancer and her moon was at 29 degrees, I would kind of still consider them conjunct just because they're in the same sign. But obviously, the more intense, the more closer the orb, the more intense it's going to be felt. Um, Saying that, her Venus actually squares my moon. And, you know, squares and synastry can cause problems, obviously, but if they're two feminine planets, Venus is a feminine planet, um, and the moon is a feminine planet as well, when they're in hard aspect, this is kind of just going to be, it's not going to cause that many external issues. Like if it was the sun square Mars, for example, those being both very masculine planets, that can cause a lot of friction and manifest outside of the relationship in the real world, um, just because they're so externalized. Whereas, yin planets, that they can cause more problems internally between the people involved in the relationship. And if it's a masculine planet in hard aspect to a feminine planet, like the sun and the moon, for example, um, that causes like fireworks. People tend to just say hard aspects are bad and soft aspects are good. I don't find that to be the case at all, especially in synastry. Masculine planets in hard aspect to feminine planets. That really is where the charts start to like really come alive, and those are going to be the most exciting parts about a relationship. But I digress. So Venus Moon contacts in any aspect are going to bring you know kind of like a neediness to each person, and they're going to go the extra mile for each other. But with the square, there can be a tendency to uh, feel jealous and possessive of the partner. Again, it doesn't have to be a romantic thing, and this is something that she's never going to admit to me, probably. Scorpio is a jealous sign. It's very possessive. Leo, not so much. Leo's more self-concerned. Um, and so with her Venus and being the outer planet aspecting my moon, which is very private anyways, I know from our synastry alone, she feels this kind of possessiveness over me. And it's something she's never going to admit to because she has Venus square Uranus natally. And she doesn't want to admit closeness because in her mind, she doesn't even think she needs closeness a lot of the time. Uh, Based on the synastry, I can tell she feels this kind of like possessiveness over me, especially if I'm meeting her emotional needs and I'm kind of caring for her and nurturing her in the ways that she feels like um, she needs to be. If someone else was to come into the picture and kind of threaten that, being in Scorpio in the 12th house, she's never going to say it out loud, but this will kind of like threaten her sense of safety with me. Being her friend and whatnot. Uh, so that square can kind of it means we are considerate of each other's feminine natures and whatnot, but there is a clash there, and maybe sometimes I can be a bit too I don't want to say loud because my moon isn't loud. It's just maybe a bit more emotionally expressive than she is comfortable putting on display. Venus is that kind of superficial sense of relating. The moon is very personal as well. So my kind of even me posting this video about us might kind of rub her the wrong way because she doesn't like the fact that I'm sharing things about our relationship with the public, and that might kind of grind her gears a bit and make her a bit jealous. like the fact that people out there are going to be able to see um our charts together and me talking about it. And again, it's not a conscious thing, and she's never going to admit to it, but this is just an example of how these energies can kind of play out. Um, we also have her Venus trining my sun, and so Sun Venus aspects in any aspect, even the hard ones, they're going to be indicative of a real strong kind of affection for each other. Um, and again, we have the masculine planet, the sun, being in aspect to a feminine planet. Um, Again, it's not hard aspect. So if this was a hard aspect, there would be more fireworks going off. But this is kind of just a nice, um, aspect that we have between our charts, just because my expression of myself is very much in line with how she relates socially, and that can just be with the fact that Sun in Cancer isn't particularly loud and doesn't require a lot of attention, so that really does kind of assist her Scorpio Venus in it makes it more comfortable for her. If I had the Sun in Leo that was squaring her um, Scorpio Venus, then that can kind of cause more problems just in the sense that more externally, I'm going to probably want to take her, um, like show her around a bit more, introduce her to more people. And again, she's fine with that in the sense that she can come off as more sociable than she really is, but nothing's ever really gonna kind of go beyond a certain point with her regarding most people, and that can kind of drain her Venus a lot of the time. Uh, just Venus and Scorpio is very private, and especially in the 12th house, it's secretive as well. She might feel invaded upon if my Sun was in Leo, trying to kind of connect her with too many people. But just being my Sun in Cancer, it's really soothing for both of us, I think, to relate to each other. And then okay, so this is a tough one, but you wouldn't think this would be in general kind of synastry because they're both kind of outer planets. But her Uranus, which we know squares her Venus, squares my Saturn. And when you look at synastry, you're typically going to focus on outer planet to personal planet, or just the personal planets to personal planet. But you're not going to focus on outer planet because it doesn't really mean that much in the grand scheme of things. But we know her Venus squares Uranus, and this is a huge kind of sore spot for her in her relational ability, just because there is that sense of her wanting to be free and not having to um, be responsible for anyone else, really. She kind of just wants to um, exist and do whatever she wants to do with that kind of like freedom urge or whatever. And with my um, Saturn being in my first house of my physical body and my personality, and it squaring my moon, I can kind of, she can feel like I'm like a wet blanket in a lot of ways, and I'm kind of trying to confine her, which based on my chart, Venus and Mars and Gemini, it's kind of like anything goes a lot of the time. I do have Venus opposite Pluto, so that can kind of maybe make me seem a bit more intense and a bit more possessive than I actually am. Uh, I want her to live her life, obviously, and no matter how many times I say that, she can still feel like I'm kind of trying to, cut her wings I'm trying to like cut her wings off so she can't fly away, which, isn't the case at all. But just my general kind of presence can be a bit austere for her, desire to kind of disconnect and do whatever she wants to do. And this is actually engaging in um, like a grand cross between like all of these planets, her Venus squaring my moon squaring my Saturn, um, her Uranus squaring my Saturn, and then her Uranus opposite my moon. So it's essentially forming a grand cross, which is going to talk about this her Venus being opposite my Saturn is essentially like a long-term alliance. But again, she's a Venus Uranus person. So her Venus being opposite my Saturn is going to make her feel restricted and like she can't go out there and live her life and do certain things, even though I'm not saying that she needs to, not do this hiking trip or, whatever. She can do whatever she wants. But it's just my general kind of presence in her life. She can feel like a bit restricted by me. And again, this can come down to like, some kind of projection on her end because she does have her Saturn square my Sun. So if anything, she's more restrictive towards me. Um, and she's just interpreting her restriction of me. And again, her Venus is squaring my moon. She's very possessive of me, and that Venus square Uranus in her chart, and again, moon opposite Jupiter. She probably doesn't want to admit that she feels more possessive of me because that clashes with her Venus Uranus going on, and so it's easier for her to just say, um, Casey's more controlling of me. Casey's the one that you know. Um, like doesn't want to leave the house. Cases, which I don't, but like, do you know what I mean? It's kind of like she's the one that doesn't want me to, go out and have fun, which is kind of like I will go out and have fun with her. I have Moon in Leo. I'm very, um, concerned with having fun. I like to have fun. It's just that, these kind of issues that she has, she's projecting on me because, the sun in hard aspect to Saturn in Synastry is again, it's a very impenetrable bond between the two. The square is like the strongest kind of aspect other than the conjunction, but it's neither of them are letting go. Her Saturn in Aries is not going to let go. My Sun in Cancer is not going to let go, especially being cardinal signs as well. They're kind of it can act like an opposition. I've noticed squares between cardinal signs because they both want to do their own thing. And it's kind of like a push, not push pull. They're both pulling in the opposite direction, so it can kind of act like an opposition. I've noticed sometimes. Um, but Saturn, she's going to project her issues onto me. She sees me shining my Cancerian light. And again, like Cancer is also very creative, and we went to music school together, and she ended up dropping out. And there probably was this kind of sense of inadequacy with her feeling like Casey went on and succeeded and graduated from university, getting this creative degree. She was always, writing music, whereas I think she struggled a bit to produce much work when we were there, and she ended up, dropping out. And back in, Aries has to do with the self, and Saturn has to do with limitations. And she actually has Saturn in her fifth house of creativity. So there's this real kind of like sore spot for her regarding her kind of creative expression. Meanwhile, here I am, creative Sun in Cancer, it comes very easily to me. And maybe there's a bit of resentment there as well. Um, and she can kind of feel responsible for me in that kind of way. She might see me as someone she needs to take care of, just because it's her Saturn. But the reality is, a lot of the time, I feel like I'm taking care of her. But that's kind of all I wanted to say about our synastry. So, do you notice how if we looked at our synastry alone, you can kind of see, oh, Sun Saturn, there's a kind of parent-child dynamic, but you can't really go further than that. And then, the her Venus trining my Sun, yeah, I mean, you can kind of just say that is kind of a general affection aspect to have, and her, Venus squaring or her Venus opposite my Saturn, oh, that just means there's a long-term alliance. It's going to be very hard to kind of break away from this relationship. But if you add in the fact that she has a Venus square Uranus natally, and then so my Saturn being opposite her Venus is going to kind of is really going to irritate her versus if someone had their Venus trining Saturn natally and my Venus, if they had Venus trining Saturn natally and then my Saturn was opposite their Venus, they'd probably be fine with that because they're comfortable with that kind of energy. Saturn and Uranus are also enemies in the mythological stories associated with astrology. There's a real fear of Saturn by Uranus, um, because Saturn is about responsibility and timing and being responsible and making sure all the checks and balances are in place. And Uranus is just concerned with the bigger picture. It doesn't care about the details. It's just trying to, um, again, it's associated with all kind of yeah, the bigger picture in a non-Jupiterian way. Like there's a quote that's often associated with Uranus, which is and Aquarius, is that you need to break a couple eggs to make an omelet, whereas that's kind of like Uranus's thing. And also, Venus Uranus can be very kind of like cold in that way. There can be sudden endings to relationships, and that has happened with us in the past. We kind of got into, I don't even want to say a fight, but it was just like, there was a falling out over literally nothing, and we didn't talk for like years after that. Um, because again, with her secretive nature, she didn't want to reach out. She kind of just, stuck to herself and, moved on with her life in that way. Whereas I was kind of during this time, I had other relationships, I got married, and so on and so forth, and she wasn't there for any of that. And yeah, there's a real kind of like coldness to the love nature when Venus is in hard aspect to Uranus, just because there is that kind of black and white mentality. It can come down to, well, this person did something I didn't like, I'm never talking to them again. Um, so yeah, and whereas Saturn is kind of like, this person did something I didn't like, I'm gonna see if it happens again. And then they do it a second time, and it's like, hey, they did it again. Can I live with this? And then it kind of goes on from there. There's a certain amount of like weighing the pros and cons when it comes to Saturn, whereas Uranus is kind of like just very black and white. And again, going back to her, I'm so sorry, I'm all over the place. Going back to her moon opposite Jupiter, she's going to be blinded to her own prejudices and sorry, her own prejudice and injustices, and not kind of look within and figure out what's really going on inside of her that can cause these issues in her relationship. Anyways, so that's one of what I wanted to say about her. And I wanted to quickly touch on my husband's chart and explain why two people like us would get married and where our similarities are and stuff like that. So if we go to my husband's chart, we can see, okay, my husband has a um, Moon Saturn conjunction. So I have the square, he has the conjunction. We're both Moon Saturn people. Whereas if you remember, my best friend had Moon opposite Jupiter. So she's a Moon Jupiter person. That's very different to Moon Saturn. And again, that's where we clash a lot with our personalities. That causes problems in our relationship. Whereas with me and my husband, our Moon Saturn, even though they're both in hard aspect, or in his case, neutral aspect, um, that that assists our relationship just because we operate emotionally the same way. He also has his moon in um, fire signs, so our moons are also compatible. Mine and my best friend's moon are not making an aspect to each other. So there's that. Also, Moon Saturn conjunction is occurring in my husband's seventh house, so he's going to need a Moon Saturn partner. Is essentially what that's saying. Um, with Saturn in his seventh house, I have Saturn in my first house, so there is that kind of that sense of immediate recognition between us. He saw me immediately as someone he could see himself in some kind of partnership with. Again, it's not just romantic, it's not just sexually, it's just someone you want to be with long term, especially with Saturn. Someone that kind of you can see has something that you want and has something that you feel like you're lacking. And then, if you remember, I have Libra ruling my seventh house, and Libra is ruled by Venus. My husband has Venus in his 10th house, which is a very public house. So that's a kind of similarity there as well. I would have seen his Venusian kind of artistic expression on very much on display in the 10th house, and that would have kind of subconsciously triggered something in my heart or mind or soul or whatever, telling me this is someone that would be potentially be a good partner for you just because they have something that you feel like you lack. And regarding our Synastry, um, okay, this one I think. Whereas me and my best friend have the trine between our sun and moon and the conjunction, if you want to consider that. Me and my husband actually have the square. And with the square, again, it's the feminine planet being the moon in hard aspect to a masculine planet. These are the kind of fireworks going off in our relationship. Um, like my best friend, he also has his Saturn squaring my sun. So that is that sense of him kind of projecting his own issues onto me and my solar nature. When in reality they're his issues, especially this is like a double projection because he has those planets in his seventh house. He's going to project them anyways. And with it being in hard aspect to my sun, he's projecting those issues directly onto my sun. And I've noticed that, you know, um, Aries kind of wants to fight and protect, and Cancer just wants to be cared for in a lot of ways. And I've noticed that my husband kind of he doesn't like it when my Cancerian nature, like my best friend, they don't like it when my Cancerian nature is kind of not directed towards them in a certain way, because it feels like it's threatening their Saturn in Aries of them feeling like they're worth anything. Aries is about the self, and Saturn can be lack. There can be a sense of them feeling like there's a real lack within themselves, and in a lot of ways, Cancer can kind of fill their cup, so to speak. And there's this real kind of like panic with the Aries planets that are squaring my Cancer sun that that nurturance is going to get taken away. So it can just equate to some kind of like um what am I trying to say? Uh some kind of fear of losing uh the Cancerian light. I also didn't touch on, sorry, my husband's uh like relationship personality at all. With Pisces on his descendant, he also doesn't have any water in his chart at all. So with a water sign on the descendant, he's going to want to get that kind of the psychic kind of intuition from, and the partner is going to be in touch with the kind of spiritual uh world and emotional world. He projects that kind of responsibility onto the partner. And um with Jupiter and Capricorn again, like, Jupiter and Capricorn is in it, especially in his fifth house. This is someone that's going to be more cautious when it comes to love and romance. And as I, explained before, I'm not someone that is, even though I have Venus and Gemini, I'm not out on the town, um, in any kind of, I'm not really engaged in much lively kind of social life or anything like that. Um, Also, so he has, this conjunction in his seventh house of the partner. The partner's going to be emotionally restrained. He has his chart ruler in Capricorn, Jupiter in Capricorn again in the fifth house, someone that is romantically kind of open but restrained at the same time. And then he also has an unaspected Venus in Gemini. I don't look at out of sign aspects. Um, so you can kind of gather about his relationship profile. He's um, looking for a partner that is kind of cool, like cool down in a way. This isn't someone that is going to be flying off the handle. Like if my husband was to be in a relationship with, if we compared their basic personalities, if he was to be in a relationship with my best friend, a Venus Uranus person, and Moon Jupiter, um, that is going to cause major, major issues because she's too reactive. And my husband needs someone that is emotionally kind of non-reactive, is able to kind of restrain themselves because he restrains himself as well. Like, this is still his moon. Even though he wants to project that onto the partner, this is his emotional nature. Um, so, like, again, if they were to be in any kind of like romantic relationship, let's say, there can be, it's what's called an erotic relationship, which is when two partners are existing in their own life. And Venus Uranus persons, they need erotic relationships. And by erotic I just mean there's a lot of stimulus happening. They're both kind of living their life and doing their own thing, and they're together because they want to be together. Whereas Moon Saturn people, a lot of the time they're going to fall into static relationships, which has a lot to do with roles and duties. And you know the fact that me and my husband got married when we are so young, it's a very much a static relationship in that the sense that he's the husband, I'm the wife, he's the dad, I'm the mom. Our roles are very clear, and that can be restrictive. Being Moon Saturn people, we feel fine with that. That's what's comfortable for us. Um, I would probably die if I had to be in a kind of erotic relationship because there's too much emotional and social overload. And this is you'll see this in relationships as well. If there's one person kind of getting their needs met, like hypothetically, let's say um my best friend was getting her social needs met and her being able to kind of, if she took me on this hiking trip, if she took me on this hiking trip, her getting her needs met and everything like that, she's having a good time. I'm not. I feel indebted to her based on other synastry aspects that we have. Um, that would be too much for me, and that could break the relationship because I'm kind of in an environment and in a relationship that I don't want to be in. Whereas she feels fine, I feel terrible. Um, Me and my husband, for example, we both feel terrible, but that feels kind of good for us as Moon Saturn people. If my husband tried to marry my best friend and expected her to fulfill my current role, she would probably die because she's too restricted. So, anyways, that's my husband's kind of personality and relationship profile, and you can see how that relates and harmonizes with mine. And so, if we go to our bi wheel and go back to our aspects and whatnot, um, so with this going on, and with my best friend as well. I didn't mention it though. I've got to. My Venus is sextiling these planets, and this essentially is just softening that square that's already here. If this Venus was placed somewhere else in my chart, um, that square might actually be too much for me. I might feel too restricted and too criticized, and be very hurt because we're talking about, Sun in Cancer after all. I might feel too hurt by that square going on. But with my Venus softening um, his Moon Saturn conjunction and the square to my Sun, um, it makes it more bearable for me. And also, Venus sextile Saturn, just like the opposition between me and my best friend, the sextile is going to promote longevity to the relationship. And we also have um this is kind of not difficult to talk about, it's kind of just difficult to explain. We'll see Mars in aspect to Saturn, uh, in hard or soft aspect in a lot of long-term relationships, specifically marriages charts, just because, when you get married, you're expected to kind of ground yourself and you sacrifice your individuality in a particular way where it isn't about you anymore. Again, my best friend would have a problem with that, being Venus Uranus and Uranus conjunct the fourth house. She needs that kind of freedom. Whereas for me, it was kind of like I consciously sacrificed any kind of individuality that I had um, for the marriage because there's kind of I have with the moon Saturn, I feel like I have a kind of domestic duty to uphold. As with my husband with the conjunction, we were both fine living this kind of life. Um, and so my Saturn conjunct his Mars, it can kind of restrict his libido in a way. He's told me that he finds it difficult to sort of approach me in general. He finds, I have moon squaring Saturn natally, so I am kind of cooled off in a certain way that I'm not going to um approach him necessarily, not just sexually, but just in general. I'm harder to get a read on, and he can kind of feel like I'm a bit unapproachable. That kind of energy, and especially, me being his wife, you would expect me to kind of be what's the word? Kind of receptive to him, and I am, but he finds it hard to initially kind of approach me. Um, and his Mars is squaring my moon, which is this is good for fertility. Again, it's a masculine planet in any kind of aspect to a feminine planet, but with the hard aspects, this is fireworks going off. Um, he's and Mars in Taurus is very much a provider energy. Moon in Leo wants to be provided for very much. Um, so he works very hard in the sense to kind of provide for my needs. And again, uh, his Saturn is trining my moon. So even though I have the square natally, his Saturn trining my moon kind of gives me a bit of an outlet to kind of offset the heaviness that I carry with my Saturn moon conjunction. And again, our moons are in trine, so that's always nice. Emotionally, we're very much on the same page. But going back to this conjunction, which sets off my natal T square, uh, I've noticed that this can kind of make him, again, unconsciously, it's not conscious, he can feel like he wants to keep me in a very kind of dependent um, state just because of, that T square that I have natally. It can be hard for me to kind of not operate in the world, but, I am kind of sensitive to things. And then I'm also kind of not willing to kind of um, express myself. So I can there is kind of like a melancholic, depressive nature about me, which can kind of not kill his libido, but that's it can be difficult for men. You see this a lot with like the Madonna whore complex. It can be difficult for men to kind of fulfill their kind of Martian assertiveness. But again, Mars in Taurus is in its fall. It's not particularly assertive, anyways. Do you know what I mean? Anyways, Mars being in hard aspect to Saturn in Synastry, again, for my best friend, that would kind of probably be a bit of a deal breaker for her. But for me, being a bit more domestic, my husband being a bit more domestic, this is kind of fine. It's irritating, it's difficult, but it does promote uh, longevity in the sense that it's not love longevity. You feel bound to this person in the worst possible ways, which again can work for us in our marriage. Uh, I think this is anything, Saturn aspecting anything in Synastry is going to be very karmic. And especially with his Saturn squaring my Saturn conjunct his Mars, there is some kind of, if you want to get into like evolutionary astrology, I would really recommend Karmic Connections by Judy Hall. She just talks about how, these kinds of patterns reoccurring patterns in a chart can point to the fact that in a past life, uh, these souls were kind of indebted to each other. And based on my own studies, I've come to the conclusion that based on a past life, I don't even know if I believe in past lives to be honest, but I digress. Um, at some point in a past life, my husband feels indebted to me and feels responsible for taking care of me. And you'll see this in, various other things in our chart. Um, but to kind of end on a positive note, we have Venus conjunct Mars in our synastry. And again, I'm ruled by Mars because I'm Aries rising. So Mars has a lot to do with my physical body. In my husband's chart, because it's an unaspected Venus, that's going to be projected onto women all the time. That just means it isn't integrated into his psyche at all. Um, so what he likes in a woman, conjunct my physical body point, he finds me very physically attractive. But this is also good for any kind of romantic relating because we're talking about the two romantic planets being in aspect and again being conjunct. They're already together. They're in the same sign. They're speaking the same language. They like the same things. They want the same things. What Mars wants, Venus is going to give, and what Venus wants, Mars is going to give Venus as well, just naturally. It doesn't need to try. It's just again, very good for sexual relating. So whilst this can kind of cool down his libido in a certain way, we don't have much. There's sexual frustration, but there's not sexual dysfunction, if that makes sense, in our relationship. But this is what I mean about synastry. Um, if he didn't have his Venus here and he had his Venus in, um, let's say, let's just say his Venus in Scorpio, the same degree as my best friend's, so it's not aspecting my Venus at all. So his Venus is over there, not aspecting excuse me, not aspecting my Mars at all. It may be even quincunxing it, which I don't really look at, but let's just say it's, quincunxing my Mars, um, which means there is a kind of awkwardness there and a kind of ick factor. And then we also have um this Saturn Mars conjunction going on that would point to sexual frustration and sexual dysfunction. Whereas thankfully we don't have that. We have the conjunction between the two sexual planets. Um, so yeah, there's sexual tension, and sexual frustration, but not sexual dysfunction. And then additionally, my Jupiter squares his Venus, and my astrology teacher Maria De Simone, she referred to this as the always Christmas aspect, which essentially just means these people are going to spoil each other, and when it's a man and a woman, it's typically going to be the man, not always though, but the man spoiling the woman. And in this case, with my Jupiter being in Pisces, my husband, uh, my kind of interest in learning and learning about spiritual things, again, with his Pisces descendant, the partner is the spiritual one and kind of the mysterious one. Um, my pursuit of astrology, for example, and creative pursuits like music, he supports me. Venus is how you spend money. He's always financially supported me in my endeavors because there's something about that he really appreciates. Um, but it can, with being a square, it can be too much. Maybe he spends a little too much money. He's a bit more irresponsible with his money and spending when it comes to me. In our entire relationship, he's never once said no to me. He's always bought me everything that I've wanted, which again makes my Leo moon really sing. I hope I've kind of explained. Um, I hope I've explained how important it is to look at individual charts and understanding really what each person wants in their relational life. Uh, and don't try to just run to the synastry aspects and say, oh my God, we have Saturn square the sun. This relationship's never going to work out. Typically, it will with Saturn aspects, even in hard aspects, just because you can't get away from them. Saturn aspects are going to bind you together for a really long time. And you know, just because you have good aspects with someone doesn't really mean anything if you have a Venus Neptune person and then a Venus Uranus person and everything looks all good on paper. But then you think about it and you say, okay, the Venus Neptune person is going to be more sensitive in love, more giving in love, and the Venus Uranus person is going to be more selfish. Chances are the Venus Uranus person is going to take the uh the kind of the generous nature of the selfless nature of the Venus Neptune person. They're going to take from that person and never um, return any kind of sympathetic sacrificial love. they're just going to take from the Venus Neptune person, and then the Venus Neptune person ends up feeling, very hurt by that because their needs are not being met. So I hope I've kind of given you some food for thought, and given you something to kind of help you understand how relationship astrology works, because again, I've never heard many astrologers really talking about this or demonstrating this. So yeah, from this video, you can tell that me and my best friend have some kind of personality issues and clashes with each other, but there is evidence to support this being a very kind of um, what's the right word? It makes sense that we're still friends after all this time, even after a really long time apart. And my studies in astrology have kind of helped me, and because I tell her everything as well about astrology. It helps us kind of understand where the other person is coming from and where we're actually being triggered. And it's not necessarily the other person; it's our own issue that we need to work through. And then you compare, our relationship to me and my husband's relationship, and how, oh, it makes sense, they got married, it makes sense they're together, versus like, again, we didn't look at my husband and my best friend's inter aspects, but just based on their personalities alone, you can tell there's not going to be any kind of marriage, long term, intimate relationship between the two, just because they're too different. And my husband definitely wouldn't get his needs met by my best friend, and she would have no interest in being his wife uh, to meet his needs, and things like that. So I hope this has been helpful. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.